Hi, I'm Nancy Smith from the University of Buffalo School of Social Work, and I have Mike Langlois here from Boston, who we've been spending some time talking about social work and technology, and we thought we'd talk a little bit right now about the concept of developing a personal learning network. And let me just say briefly what that really kind of is. I mean, I think we all already in our professional lives decide people that we can trust to keep us abreast of new developments in our fields, whether those be authors or colleagues or places that we go for continuing education. So really, personal learning networks and technology are just about using the technologies that are out there as a way of developing our own networks. And Mike, maybe you'd like to start by talking a little bit about how you've used that, and I do the same thing.
Sure. Well, one of the ways I really do use Twitter is as a personal learning network, and I really like to use the example of Twitter because one of the #1 questions I get from people when we talk about technology is, why would I use Twitter? I don't want to know about anybody's food. I don't want to see pictures of anybody's dinner that night. And I had that initial experience when I tried Twitter. I thought, why would somebody want to send out little tweets or retweets of 140 characters? And that was because I hadn't developed Twitter as a personal learning network. It wasn't until over time I started connecting with Nancy on Twitter or connecting with Jonathan Singer, Social Work Podcast, or Dorley M, people that through their tweets, their posts, I started to see, oh, they're sending me links for really interesting articles. Oh, these are people that I really think I can enjoy what they have to offer in terms of intellectual engagement. That Twitter started to become a personal learning network for me. And so now one of the main places that I actually get information is from that personal learning network. So Twitter has actually changed for me. It's not something that's random, and it's not something about people posting random tweets about what they're doing, as much as people using shortened links. And we probably should tell people about this neat thing called Bitly. It's bit.ly, that you can take whatever website link and put it in there and it'll shrink it. So it gives you even more room to put it in your tweet. But so Twitter has been a real good example for me of how I can harness this social media to create a personal learning network.
Yeah, I mean, I think Twitter's been that way for me too, and one of the things that I wasn't clear about with Twitter is that you get to pick and choose who you follow in Twitter. So there may be people tweeting about Justin Bieber out there, but you don't have to choose to follow them. You get to pick the individuals that you want to follow. And actually Twitter is now getting pretty sophisticated at recommending people to follow, but you could actually go on, search Twitter for keyword like social work, and they're going to bring up names of people who've listed that as one of their keywords in their bio, and then you automatically have people that you can check out to see what they've been posting and follow them. And I wrote sort of a basic blog post about this idea of what's the basics that you need about Twitter. But really, just like the other ways that we've established personal learning networks without technology, it's about trust. It's about finding people who are credible. So you start to follow Jonathan Singer, you start to follow Dorley M, I start to follow you and say, well, I know Mike. He's got very thoughtful blog posts. He shares this kind of information. Dorley does this wonderful, once every week or so, does this great summary of some of the best things across Twitter for mental health and psychology and social work. So then you don't even have to follow those people. You follow Dorley and you get that summary. And so you really do get to stay abreast of things. I mean, one of my favorite examples of this comes from a colleague at University of Buffalo in the School of Medicine. And he tells a story of how he had a resident he was working with who had a kid in the emergency room, and the kid was basically not doing well on a ventilator. The kid was not responding to treatment. And the resident came to him and said, what are we going to do? And he said, let me see what I can find out. So he got online, and he went to Medscape and all the places you go to look for evidence, couldn't find anything in the research literature on this problem. And so then at 4 in the morning, he gets on his Twitter network and he sends out a tweet to something to the effect of, does anybody have experience with this type of thing happening when people are on ventilators? So he didn't talk about a case, he took it to the situation level. And when he woke up later, he came and he had a response from a physician in Europe who said, I'm writing up 4 or 5 cases about this. You might want to check this issue out. And it turned out that issue was what the problem was, and they were able to save the kid's life. So, part of what I say about this is, where else can you now get access to an international network of experts and do it over a couple of hours? But he didn't get on Twitter that night. I mean, if he just had started and said, gee, I'm going to sign up for Twitter and send out this tweet, he never would have been successful. He developed this network from people that he followed, who he trusted, who also listened and talked to him. So people were checking in to see what he was tweeting, and he had this relationship already set up. And that's the part you have to set up beforehand, and then you start to learn from people, and then in a tight situation, you actually have an expanded network of people to call on for expertise about things. And that, to me, was like, wow, how fortunate for that kid and his family that they had a globally connected physician. And what are the situations that we're in where you could do that? I mean, I can think of times I've used listservs that were there for specific types of therapy. I'm trained in EMDR, and when I was learning EMDR, there were nobody in my community who knew EMDR, and I would be, okay, I'm going to be using this when someone who's pregnant. What do I need to be aware of with that? So I would throw a question out, and within 24 hours, I would hear from lots of people, including some of the top names in the field, who would say, well, these are the things you might want to consider, or here's this adapted release of, sort of information or risk that you may want to do. You may want to talk to their physician first. I mean, all this information I never would have had access to if I had just been relying on my own resources for that sort of thing. And those things still exist. There are still listservs. But people are often using Twitter in place of some of those things, or they're using things like Google+, which has some great communities, LinkedIn, some folks are using that, even Facebook. It's really, all these platforms have that ability. It's where do you want to start, I think, is the issue. And how do you want to stay on top of it? Because to me, Twitter is very easy to use. And the fact that you have to limit yourself to 140 characters keeps me concise.
Well, the other thing about Twitter that I really want to make sure people understand is the power of the retweet. That there's this concept. So first off, when we say tweet, we mean you basically put out a statement that's 140 characters, and it can include a link to an article, or it can just be something that you want to say. But then someone else can look at that, and they can forward that to all their followers, and that's called a retweet. And I think all of us are capable of having great ideas, but I don't think all of us have a great idea every single minute of the day. And a lot of times people are holding back from Twitter because they're thinking, I don't have something to say. And yet if you think in your personal learning networks in real life, you don't always have to raise your hand in every class. You're not always the one publishing the article. You're often the one saying, hey, look at this article that so-and-so did. And so part of what makes personal learning networks the same as on social media is we rely a lot on people to forward things because we trust their judgment in appreciating and understanding things, not because they're generating the content all the time. It's not always that Nancy Smith has the right idea, it's that Nancy Smith can tell me so-and-so had a good idea. And so I think sometimes people need to take a little pressure off themselves that they don't have to tweet something profound every time. Usually when I do my Twitter for my personal learning network, I have a combination of my blog, which comes out usually once a week. And so for every time I post about a blog, I usually post 2 or 3 things that I've seen in social media or psychology news sources. Because I think that a lot of what I have to offer people isn't my own individual thinking, but hey, I noticed that. And so personal learning networks, again, are trusting people to not just promote their own agenda, but promote an interest in learning.
Well, and in fact, if somebody's promoting their own agenda, that's usually one of the things that makes me not feel real trusting of them. And when I decide who to follow, I look at what they've been tweeting. And if they're only tweeting the stuff they're doing, I'm usually not interested in it. For me, finding places to follow both individuals, but you have lots of organizations that are on these places. Parts of the federal government that are sharing information over Twitter from their websites, and you can follow them as well. So I know when the National Institute on Mental Health issues a statement that they're no longer recommending medication as the first intervention for early onset schizophrenia, that in fact they've changed their perspective on that. I found that out, the day that they announced that. And many people won't hear that information for, I would like to say, a year. I think it could be a lot longer than that. One of the unpopular things that I've said in trainings I've done on evidence-based practice is I think that if you want to be using current methods and methods that have some research support, you have to be online. Because now these treatment manuals are often not disseminated anywhere except in PDF files and things like that. And so you can't stay abreast of those things if you're not, have your own network to stay abreast of what's been published and be able to download some free, most of the time free resources for people. There's some amazing things there, but you have to know who to follow, and you have to follow people who know who to follow. So I could rely on Dorley to let me know about that stuff. I don't have to track it all down myself. And that's the beauty of the Personal Learning Network, is it's really the same way now. I don't have to know everything. I just want to stay connected to the people who keep me abreast of the stuff I need to be aware of. And then I can share that with the other people I'm connected with, and it gets passed on.
One other thing I'd want to just say about personal learning networks is I think we've talked a lot about, and rightly so, sort of more academic examples of how people learn. And I think there's a lot of other kinds of learning, and one of the kinds I'm thinking about was learning about social events or current events. And what I'm thinking about in particular is how Twitter was so crucial for myself and people in my family when we lived in Boston this year and we had the Boston Marathon attacks. And the information of what was going on and what was closed and what we knew was coming fast and furious through Twitter streams. Mm-hmm. And there was some misinformation, just like there was in the news, but I remember actually watching the news while I was following Twitter and noticing that Twitter was actually much more accurate.
Hours ahead of the news, too.
Because whereas the person that was broadcasting the news was at a desk somewhere or getting multiple reports from people in the field, I was getting direct reports from people in the field. And so one of the ways that my personal learning network kind of kicked in was it helped alleviate some anxiety because I felt like I actually was knowing a little bit more accurate during real time. So personal learning networks aren't necessarily just for if you're doing research or a dissertation. Personal learning networks are a way you can alleviate your anxiety in a traumatic event. And I think we can use Twitter for both.
And in fact, people who are studying disasters use them to stay abreast because I think they are really good predictors of what's going on. Hurricane Sandy was a similar issue for me, and I was able to track it. And you do see some garbage there, but it's interesting. You can sort it out very quickly based upon the sources and repetition. You see people in a particular area saying something, and then it has a lot of credibility. And it was hours before that stuff would show up onto CNN. So it really is a way to just stay learning and connected, and to be able to find that information on a thing like Twitter. That's part of what we talk about as digital literacy then is,
Yep.
Do I know how to go to Twitter and find the current earthquake when I'm trying to find out about it? Because I might not be following people about that. And our skills to connect to that information are some of the things Howard Rheingold talks about when he talks about NetSmart and ways to stay abreast of things in the world. And they definitely help with anxiety. I think that's a good point.
And your crap detector. That's what
Yes.
Howard talks about, is the crap detector. And crucial, again, I think we keep coming back when we talk about technology, we keep coming back and talking about relationships, because Twitter doesn't happen in a vacuum. There are people with minds and souls and hearts and feelings that are sending these tweets out into the world for others to see. And we need to keep in mind that those are people behind those tweets. And that's what makes those networks powerful, not because one particular person said something, particularly profound, but because I know that person through a deeper way, either through an existing personal relationship like we have, or through a cumulative effect of knowing them through their tweets, what their interests are. But it's never just about the tweets. The personal learning network is always about the people and the relationships that are forming, and the tweets are just another medium for it.
Mm-hmm. Well, that feels like a good stopping place on that point, but I would say that that's probably the part of the technology that keeps me most jazzed most of the time.
Right.
So,
Yeah. And maybe this is something to think about in the future. We might want to offer something on Twitter, specifically how to use Twitter clinically.
that's a thought. I like that.